Welcome to the Legionary. On today, my birthday. Today we're going to be doing a 7.5 kilometre march, and we're carrying over 40 kilos. Mostly off-road as well, which will be noticeable because last time we were marching on the road, tarmac, and it pretty much destroyed my feet. So we're trying to find more track, less road. A couple of differences to this march is that it's going to be a heavier load, over 40 kilos this time. We are carrying the dolobra, which is the famous Roman entrenching tool. It's got an axe here and a pick here for digging yourself in, and also the heavy patera pot. Patera was a Roman mess tin. It was carried by all the Roman legionaries. Lots of examples of this have been found in various archaeological sites, and it's also depicted hanging from a furca on Trajan's column. So there we go. Let's see how we fare on this one. As you may recall, 2 weeks ago when I did the 10k march, my feet ended up slightly worse for wear. Just a word about the Caligay, interesting point on it. These are definitely, they're hobnailed sandals, and they're definitely made for off-road marching. Marching on a hard surface just chews my feet up. Today I'm not feeling any of the pain or the friction that I was getting on the tarmac roads. An interesting point about these sandals, if you want to zoom in on the sandal there, is the fact that the edges, they're cut out of a single piece of leather, obviously the strap part, but the edges are rounded, and the rounding of those edges means that it doesn't cause friction with your feet. It's an interesting detail, design detail of these sandals. I just thought I'd point that out. Interesting sandals. Maybe not, maybe you don't care about sandals, but anyway, I just thought I'd mention it. Some waterways here, small streams. Yeah, one thing to point out is that on the last march I did 10 kilometres with 40 kilos of equipment, and my feet obviously broke out into blisters, and I had to take 2 weeks off, 2 weeks rest, and clean up my wounds and get back and make myself combat ready before we could start it all over again. I'm 48 years old today. So I'm a 48-year-old man. I'm well fed. I haven't suffered from any debilitating diseases over time that I know of, and so I'm in fairly good health. These guys would have been in their early 20s, late teens, tough as nails, but malnourished, underfed. You know, an army on campaign is never at its peak, despite what anybody says. Even in the modern day, armies are always poorly fed, you know, with the cheapest food available. So expecting a guy to march 25 miles with 40 to 50 kilos of equipment on his back and then be combat ready immediately after, with all the various, you know, diseases, be it anything from rickets to I don't know, you know, vitamin deficiency, it's just not feasible. I just don't see how, you know, how a soldier could be, you know, could sustain that kind of performance over time. In September of 52 BC, Gaius Julius Caesar, with his legions and during his conquest of Gaul, force marched to a place called Alesia, which was an oppidum or a hill fort that belonged to the Mandubi tribe. Mandubi tribe were part of a tribal sort of confederacy at the time that were resisting the Roman invasion under a man called Vercingetorix. He was, you know, as history shows, he was sort of leader of that tribal group at the time. The Romans force marched, caught them by surprise, and managed to surround the hill fort. And to contain them, they built a wall. So they built a wooden palisade all the way around, and they laid traps, and you know, it became a heavily defended position. Their intention was to starve the Gauls out and to force their surrender, which is the smart thing to do rather than engage in battle. However, the Gauls refused to give in. Even as women and children were starving to death, the Gauls refused to surrender. They called for reinforcements, and within a few weeks reinforcements arrived. So what did the Romans do? Now outmanned 10 to 1 by the Gauls, they built a second defensive rampart, wooden palisade wall behind them. The Romans were now caught between these two walls, with a town on one side and an army of reinforcements on the other. They engaged in battle, and guess what? They defeated the Gauls. So and captured Vercingetorix, the leader of the Gauls, thus ending the Gallic resistance and ensuring that Rome could now thereafter take complete control of Gaul under Caesar. Vercingetorix was a charismatic leader, tribal leader of the Gauls, a renowned warrior. He had to be, because he was countering the might of the Roman legions, and also dealing with a canny political player who was a Gaius Julius Caesar. The Romans were smart because they were able to conquer whole countries by buying out tribal leaders, by, you know, making them subservient, without engaging in battle. And just the threat of force was enough sometimes to make tribes step down. Vercingetorix didn't fall for that. He could see that the Romans were eroding his, his culture and his values, and so therefore he decided to make a stand. Unfortunately for Vercingetorix, the might of the Gallic tribes wasn't enough, and sadly he was taken prisoner, as we know, taken to Rome and eventually executed. And so it's a sad and tragic end for such a sort of unifying leader. And quite frankly, I don't think the French have ever forgiven the Romans for it. Bonjour. There's one. Bonjour. 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 Small hill, tough climb. Hobnail sandals, brilliant, give me plenty of traction. The thing that got in the way, interestingly, is the furca. So this fork I've always made quite long and a lot thicker than most people do within the reenactment community, because I'm always a great believer, you know, you need to make things that are sort of worthy of a soldier. In this case, something solid and hard wearing. And I made it a little bit longer than the examples I'd seen, because it helps with its balance. However, in this case, when I'm going up a steep incline, the length actually got in the way and I had to twist it round to one side. That didn't work. So again, this is another argument for slightly shortening the furca. The problem I have is my height. So to get under this and shoulder it, I need to do this. So just a quick example. I have to go under. And obviously I can't do that if the furca's short. I'd have to elevate it, which is no great hardship, but it's a comfort issue. It's hot, very hot.
A couple of details so far on the march. I think we're about probably more than halfway by now. My heels are still rubbing, so no matter what, my heels always rub, and they always get a bit, a bit sort of blackened by it. It's not painful, so painful that I can't walk the next day. But yeah, no other friction burns on the Caligay off-road, which is great. The other thing is obviously the right shoulder. That's always a bit painful because that's where all the load is. However, the Footwear still balances it out bizarrely, so whilst it gets uncomfortable after a while, it's not unbearable, which is interesting. The other thing is the doubling, the liner under the sub-armalis, as we call it, under my armour here. It's a sort of a quilted coat. Obviously it gets really hot, but the other thing about the metal is it retains the heat. It's like carrying a radiator. So eventually you're going to dehydrate faster than you can hydrate. So that's interesting to note. Now you think of where the Roman army fought, especially in the south and in Italy, where it's notoriously hot anyway. You can imagine fighting for several hours or possibly days wearing this type of armour. You'd have to hydrate 24/7. You'd be drinking all the time. Otherwise you'd be cramping up and just passing out. Crossing a ditch 101. That was a Roman legionary. Big ditch, descent. Put the furca in the bottom of the ditch and then step across while putting your weight on the furca. Ta-da! Job done. This is muddy. I don't mind the mud. It's actually quite nice on the feet. The hot debrief. Okay, today we did 7.5 kilometers with over 40 kilos load. So I carried my dolobra, patera and a few other items. So that's up the ante. That was, with the heat, frankly it was one of the toughest ones so far. Although the distance was shorter than last week, with the added heat and weight was pretty trying. Carrying it on one shoulder, that really finished me. I was happy to finish this march. The Caligay, fine, they're shaping up fine, okay. Still rubbing on my heels, but no blisters this time, which is great. So all in all, so far so good, a good march. Yeah, so that's a positive. Number 8, birthday march. Thank you for watching. Okay, just underway in after having completed the march. The total load is 40.1 kilos. I'm a kilo lighter than I thought I was. Obviously, earlier on I was saying that I thought we were around the 41 kilo mark, but not, we're less. I was carrying extra equipment, the dolobra here, the pickaxe, and the patera, the pot here. It was tough, it was hard, it was 7.5 kilometers. It was very warm, it was over 25 degrees. So yeah, and a lot of sweating, and it was very, very hard, and I took quite a few breaks as well. So with that in mind, do I think that a Roman legionary 2,000 years ago could have marched a similar distance carrying this load as I did? Yes, of course. Could he have marched up to 30 kilometers with this load and be battle ready? I doubt it. I just don't, I don't buy it myself. Anyway, that's my argument. Anyway, thanks for watching, and please join me on the next video.